In this presentation, I want to talk about the boost script that I've provided. Now, I've put the boost script together to work in conjunction with the marble script, and basically the boost script will temporarily modify the marble script, or a variable that's embedded in the marble script, to change the way that the marble functions for a short time. Now, it's important. So it's really interesting the minute that one script starts talking to another script or starts talking to a set of variables. At that point, really, the sky is the limit inside Unity. So this is very simple and straightforward to implement, but it is dependent on a couple of things. One, I have my marble, and the thing that is driving my marble is the marble script. Okay, and if I double-click on that marble script, the variables that we're going to talk to from the boost script is the for script. And so I've provided an updated marble script. So inside your more scripts folder, you'll notice that there's a marble.js script. It's important that you update your marble script, and attached to the marble, you can end up renaming it and modifying it later. But in order to get the boost script to work right out of the box, it's got to talk to a marble script. Okay, and again, I have updated the marble script a little bit to work with the boost. And so I'll just double click and look at the marble script, and there's a couple things that I want to point out. There's a variable called starting force, and that's just really simply, if I go and select my marble, that's when this marble comes into being, or when it's born, it has a force, in this case, of 20. So that's giving me the ability to push this marble around. So I'm operating with a force of 20. And if I decide that that's not enough or too little, and I want this to be born with a slightly lower force, I can just reduce that value directly inside the inspector. Okay, so I can push that around. Now, if I go back into my marble script for a moment, there's the force value, and this is the constant force that can be changed by scripts and some other things. So whatever the starting force is, that gets transferred to the force, and then we can modify and play with that. There's also a variable in here called reverse, which I'm not actually using just yet, and there's some other functionality that I haven't started to implement, like the jump button is being used with the space button, space bar, but there's no routine in here. There's no function yet, and that's something that we can experiment with later. Also, the fire 1 button, the mouse 1 button, nothing happens with the mouse 1 button yet, but that functionality is built into the script. Everything else works, just about the same way that we looked at the original marble script. We have the W, S, A, and D keys mapped to do certain things, and so the marble script should work just fine. Now the boost script, let me implement it and then we'll take a look at it. So here's how you implement the boost script. It's very simple, very straightforward, just like all the other scripts. What we'll do is we'll go to game object. I want to create some kind of a trigger, so I'll just use the cube. I want to make sure it's a trigger. I want to make sure it's not floating in space, and so at this point I can just simply drag and drop the boost script to the object that I want to act as the trigger. Now, if we just look at the boost script and the variables that are available inside the inspector, we can see a couple of publicly accessible variables. We have the allowed time, and this is basically like how long do we want our boost to take effect. So in this case I have it set to 5, which translates to 5 seconds. The boost, this is the value of the force. This is the value of how much force we're influencing our marble with during the time of the boost. So I have this cranked way up to 100 just so it's really obvious that when I trigger this, it's in effect. And then I have a reset speed. Now, the reset speed, in this case, I'm just going to use the same speed that if I select my marble, I have my starting force set to 18, and I can go back I can go back to my object that's triggering the boost event, and I'm just resetting the speed back to 18. And I've included that kind of functionality because, maybe every time we pick up a boost, we want to you know, when we pick up this boost object, the reset speed's a little bit faster than it was before. Maybe it goes up to 20, or maybe you have to pay maybe there's a penalty to pay. Maybe on this boost object, because it boosts so high, that the penalty that we pay is that when the speed resets, it resets very low. This is just, you know, just a value to tinker with, to play with. Inside the script, we could actually also just cause it to reset back to the same starting value that we used in our marble script, but it's just something to experiment with. There's also a boost effects sound. That's a sound clip just like we do on the menu item. It's a sound that can be triggered when this boost is in effect. But for now, the only thing that I've changed was this reset speed just a little bit. Again, I just tinkered with that value, but right out of the box, if I drag and drop the boost script onto that object, it should work right out of the box. So I'll just line this up. And when I trigger that object, you can see I take off and I fly way out into space, and actually I fly off my terrain. So I know that I know it's working, I know it's turning on, but is it turning off? And you'll notice that when I trigger this, if I just hang out for a little bit, yeah, I'm moving really fast right now. In fact, it's really hard to control. And now that trigger object disappeared. And once that trigger object is gone, that's a visual indicator that I'm back to my original speed. And I can push this marble around and see that that is in fact the case. And what's happening, I'll just jump into the boost. Let's do a quick rundown of what this boost script is doing. So we see the variable of allowed time. That's the thing that we can influence directly inside Unity. That's this variable right here, just made available inside the inspector. So we have the allowed time. We have the boost value. This is whatever we want to set it to, so that when we trigger this event, that's how much force we'll end up using. There's a call to the audio clip here, or to identify the audio clip. Here's the collision event, and all that happens is it changes. It looks for a marble script. It updates the variable, the force, to equal whatever the boost value is. So in this case, boost is equal to 100. So what it does, this line of code says, okay, let's look for a script. This script is called marble. Remember, back in Unity, we have a marble script. So it looks and finds the marble script. Once it finds the marble script, it looks for a variable called the force. So if I go back, and I'll just open up my marble script here. So we have this variable called the force. Okay, initially it starts off at 100 or 0 and it immediately changes. Well, if we go back to our boost script, the boost script is setting the force to whatever this value is. So it sets it to 100. And then it also plays this audio. Down here, there's a little countdown. Here's a little countdown functionality. And basically what this does is say, you know, whatever the current time is, subtract 1 second from it. And when that's done, run whatever code is down here. So we got a little bit of code here that says, okay, open back up the marble script, find that force value, and make it equal to whatever the reset speed is. So here's that reset speed that we have that I was tinkering with at the beginning of the presentation. So it opens up the marble script, it finds the force variable and sets the reset speed. And then there's a real quick function to destroy game object. This is, you know, kind of a handy thing that it gets rid of the trigger. So maybe, you know, I have an object, maybe it's a coin that's floating around inside my environment. Once I pick it up, once I trigger it, I want to get rid of that object, maybe. Maybe I don't. Maybe I don't want to destroy that object, and every time I hit it, I want to be able to get a boost again. So I could, if I want to keep that object around, I can just comment out that destroy game object. Of course, I can delete that line as well. But for a visual cue, I like the idea that that object exists, at least for while I'm testing and developing. That trigger exists just long enough that the force is being applied, or whatever my boost value is, that it's current. Because I know when this game object is destroyed, I know that my marble force has been reset back to its standard. So I could take this script and I could modify this in so many different ways. Basically, you know, I could instead of calling the marble script here and changing the boost value, maybe I could change another value that is, you know, the vertical thrust. You know, I could make a variable for vertical thrust, and then I could go back to my marble script, and down here when I'm pressing the fire button, I could execute a simple line of code that that applies and add force to the y-axis of this object and causes it to fly. So maybe I temporarily pick up the ability to press the mouse button and apply force along the positive y direction, giving me the ability to fly. That's probably something that I'll do once I actually get into the workflow component of building my game. But for now, I think I have all the functionality that I need to start building my level based on the scripts that I have, based on the controls, and based on the simple objects that I have. I'm satisfied that I could build a fully playable level, that I could get to the end with some hazards and some interactivity, and when I get to the end I can trigger a new level that could be even more complicated than the first level. So with that, I'm going to change gears in this presentation and really just kind of focus on some workflow and use the existing assets that I have and go back and prototype a real quick level. So look for those videos in the near future. And as is always the case, make sure that you're experimenting with this, you're saving your progress, and you're posting your works in progress to the discussion board. And of course, if you have any other questions or comments, leave those in the discussion board, and we'll catch up in the next presentation.